I never expected my first flight to end in panic, but then the millionaire CEO held my hand. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. My heart was racing as I walked through the crowded terminal. The smell of coffee mingled with nerves hung heavy in the air. My first flight. Excitement and anxiety curled my stomach into knots. I was ready, or so I thought. As we boarded, the plane's metal belly felt like a beast waiting to roar. Each step seemed to echo, the weight of my dreams pressing me down. Cabin lights flickered above like a starless sky. My seat felt wrong, too cramped, too small. I could see nervous glances cast among other passengers. It's just turbulence, I whispered to myself. Then it hit, a sudden jolt, like the earth was tearing beneath us. Gasps filled the cabin. My heart stopped. I looked around. Panic had spread. People were gripping their armrests, eyes wide, breath quickening. A woman next to me clutched her child, her face pale. I felt myself trembling. And there he was, the millionaire CEO, strikingly handsome, authoritative. He had been seated across the aisle. His presence shifted the air, magnetic. I caught him watching me, his expression calm amid chaos. And then, in a moment of surreal connection, he reached over, his hand enveloping mine. That simple act felt electric. My body was a wild storm, but his grip drew me in. "It's going to be all right," he said in a low voice, reassuring yet firm. I could feel the warmth between us, cutting through the icy dread that froze my bones. It felt intimate, strange. I was anchored by the weight of his certainty. But then the plane lurched again. The sudden drops made stomachs flip. The whispers rose. People began chanting prayers amidst cries of fear. Thoughts raced through my mind. Who was this man? Why was he on this flight? What kind of risk were we facing? Before I could ask, the lights flickered off. The emergency signal blared, a haunting siren piercing the chaos. Everyone held their breath, eyes darting. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, but his words weren't reassuring. "We're experiencing technical difficulties." My grip tightened on his hand. Everything else faded. I could feel my pulse throbbing, drowning out the sound of the storm outside. In that moment, we were the only two remaining in the universe. Fear morphed into something else, hope. Then, darkness swallowed us whole. The plane plunged, and screams erupted, drowning my thoughts. I looked into his eyes, searching for answers, but found only resolve. And just before consciousness blurred, I heard a whisper, "Trust me, hey." Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The stillness that followed the chaos was deafening, a thick curtain of silence draping over the frightened passengers. I blinked against the darkness, senses heightened, heart pounding a ferocious rhythm in my chest. It felt like an eternity before the cabin lights flickered back to life, some dim, others fully illuminating the tense faces around me. I registered their fear, wide eyes, trembling hands, the echoes of scattered prayer. But there was one pair of eyes I sought out, one hand that anchored me amidst this tumult. The CEO's grip had not faltered even in the depths of despair. I turned to him, desperate for any sign that this would not be the end. "What do we do?" I whispered, a plea woven into the words. He looked at me, and despite the terror that gripped all of us, his gaze was steady. With a calm that belied the turmoil around us, he leaned closer, as if we were suspended in an intimate bubble. "We stay strong. We listen. Everything will be all right." His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but shadows of doubt still clawed at the edges of my mind. The man next to me, a silver-haired gentleman, suddenly turned, his expression shifting to anger. "What do you know? You are just another rich guy on a plane. You think you can enough." The CEO's voice sliced through the rising panic, sharp and unwavering. "We don't have time for this. Every moment counts." There was authority in his tone, a commanding presence that subdued the anger that had started brewing. The man fell silent, and I felt a mix of gratitude and awe for my unexpected ally. Yet, moments later, turbulence surged again, a fierce lurch causing muffled gasps throughout the cabin. My heart raced anew, clawing at my chest as panic reignited. I squeezed his hand tighter, reminding myself I was not alone. Then, as if responding to the tension in the air, a flicker of hope arrived. In the seat across the aisle, a teenage girl whispered gently to a young boy beside her who trembled. "Hey, it's okay. Look, I have a snack." She pulled out a small bag of gummy bears, offering it to him. For just a moment, her sweet gesture reminded all of us of our humanity. Amidst fear, I turned back to the CEO. What if it doesn't get better? What if his expression softened as he realized the depth of my fear? Then we stay together. We face it. As I searched his features, I caught a glimpse of something deeper. Was it vulnerability? A fleeting shadow of his past he concealed behind the confident veneer? I wanted to pry into his life, understand what had shaped him into the man comforting me now. A pang of longing swelled in my heart. The truth was, here in this confined space, what had been woven into a strange tapestry of lives intertwined through shared fear. The sirens sang a mournful tune, drowning out hope, but I felt a flicker within. The plane jolted again, and I gasped as I caught sight of a light flashing near the cockpit door. It was a stark reminder that we were still trapped in something perilous. The CEO's grip tightened, and I knew he sensed my anxiety rising like the bitter waves outside. Then, in a sudden twist, the seatbelt sign dimmed, the captain's voice crackled through once more, barely audible amidst the murmurs and shifting bodies. "Prepare for emergency landing procedures." Emergency? I choked out, the word tasting foreign, heavy. Before he could respond, a scream erupted from the back of the cabin. A woman had collapsed, and chaos ensued once more. I glanced at the CEO, fear and panic writ large across my face. What if we don't make it? In his eyes, I saw a flicker of something Rowan understanding of risk I wasn't sure he had faced before. "We will," he committed, but the crack in his confidence did not go unnoticed. It was an unsaid truth. Every moment, every heartbeat could be the last. And just then, the lights flickered out a final time, plunging us into darkened uncertainty once more. My heart sank as the air shifted heavy, thick, almost suffocating. As we hurtled towards a fateful landing, a shocking realization struck. The soft heartbeat in the darkness whispered secrets, questions that burgeoned in my mind. Who was this man really? What was driving him? What would happen when we landed? Then, in the depths of shadowed turbulence, I sensed the breaking tension in the air. We were on a collision course not just with the ground, but with the truth. And as the plane rattled fiercely beneath us, I held on tighter, not just to him, but to the hope of survival and the danger of what lay ahead. Lives intertwined, tempting fate, racing against time. The doors of my heart were flung open, and I braced myself for what lay beyond the horizon, a revelation that might change everything. The instant we landed, a cacophonous chorus of cries echoed through the cabin, merging with the sound of tearing metal and screeching tires. The plane skidded violently, and I felt the CEO's hand grip mine harder, his strength becoming my only source of calm in the storm of chaos. Amid the screams, questions filled my mind like poison. I thought I had escaped a moment of certain demise, yet reality clawed at us, reminding us that our ordeal was far from over. The sudden halt pitched us all forward, throwing bodies against their restraints. I glanced quickly around and saw the teenage girl pull her younger companion close, shielding him. A few seats down, the silver-haired gentleman clutched the armrest, his face a mask of disbelief. But in every corner of the cabin, panic reignited as the emergency lights flickered against the dark like desperate stars, trying to break through an oppressive night. "Stay calm. Everyone stay in your seats." The captain's voice boomed through the intercom, though it wavered, betraying the frail demeanor of a man grappling with his own fear. I barely registered his words as adrenaline pulsed through my veins, stoking an urgency to breathe, to escape. The CEO released my hand for only a moment to disengage his seatbelt, his focus razor-sharp. "We need to help the others," he commanded gently, turning back to me. "Are you with me?" His voice, steady and deliberate, cut through the haze of fear. I nodded, more instinctively than firmly. What else could I do? Reflecting on his earlier words, I remembered the flicker of hope ignited by the girl with the gummy bears, but wondered if kindness could survive in a world bursting at the seams. The thought persisted as we navigated the aisle, bodies tangled and emotions frayed that we reached the scream. A woman pale-faced, crumpled against her seat. Her friend hovered above her, eyes wide, a mix of terror and desperation. The CEO knelt beside them, instinctively shifting into a leader once more. "What happened?" he asked, his voice gentle yet authoritative. She can't breathe," the friend shouted, panic rising to a tumultuous pitch. My breath hitched, and I felt the weight of the moment, the chaos surrounding us, the uncertainty of impending outcomes. I stepped back, my stomach twisting with anxiety, but my voice steadied. "I am a nurse," I blurted out, surprising myself. I had trained for emergencies, but this felt surreal, overwhelming. "Please, let me help." With his eyes locked onto mine, the CEO nodded solemnly. "Stay close. We'll do this together." His unwavering presence anchored me, casting away the shadows of doubt threatening to smother me. As the woman struggled for air, we worked quickly, urging her to relax. I felt a burning in my chest, not just from the fear that enveloped us, but from a flicker of clarity. Though chaos surrounded us, here was a moment of shared empathy, a powerful reminder of our humanity in crisis. A muffled voice drew our attention to the front of the cabin, where several passengers helped unbuckle a young mother with her crying baby. Despite the mounting tension, I noted the solidarity that had sprouted amidst the dread, a shared humanity glimmering gently between the horrors. Then, in the fleeting calm just before the storm of sirens resumed, a thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. The CEO had been right there with me, extending his hand not just as a gesture, but an anchor in our shared turmoil. I glimpsed the vulnerability behind his bravado, something hidden beneath the layers of confidence and control. What had he faced before? What echoes of his past haunted him? Suddenly, the emergency exit signs illuminated the chaos in stark detail. The cabin doors, sealed tight, loomed as barriers between safety and the unknown. I turned back to the CEO, fear creeping through my veins again. What if we can't get out? In that moment, a flicker of resolve sparked in his eyes. "We will, but we need to stick together." The fierce compassion encapsulated in his gaze etched deeper bonds between us, connecting us with all those around us. The tension broke outside. Responders had arrived, sirens wailing, pierce-like cries threading through the stillness. And yet behind that sound, I heard the unmistakable crack of a voice just above the chaos. "Everyone, listen." The captain's voice, shaky but carrying, echoed through the plane. "We need you all to brace for possible further turbulence as rescue teams work to get us all safe. This is not over." That single statement twisted the very air I breathed, sending chills creeping across my skin. Could we really be teetering on the edge of true danger one last time? As the cabin buzzed with nervous disbelief, the glimmer of kindness stirring my heart began to dim. I clung to hope, but darkness loomed, heavy and uncertain. In a fleeting second, I met the CEO's eyes, and the world around us vanished. I realized, perhaps too late, that understanding and revealing oneself required more than just resilience. It necessitated opening the gateway to emotion, to trust, and to vulnerability. But then, an unexpected diversion. The soft whimper of a baby cut through the tension, a reminder of innocence amidst chaos. "How can we ever truly know each other?" I whispered to him, my voice barely audible, "when we're always drowning under the weight of our fears." At that very moment, as hesitation tangled in our breaths, a deep rumble shook the cabin once more. The lights flickered ominously. Instinctively, I turned my gaze toward the emergency exits, the shadows closing in once again, swirling with menacing uncertainty. Then came the announcement that shattered my heart into a million pieces, a deeply unsettling truth. "All exit doors have malfunctioned," the captain's voice echoed. "We can't evacuate until further notice. Stay calm. Help is on the way." The finality of the words left me breathless, the weight of despair heavy against my chest. A stark reminder that everything we clung to, every breath we took, all of us together, was teetering dangerously close to the edge. The cabin fell into a heavy silence, a collective breath held in anticipation of a fate now seemingly pinned by the hand of fate itself. The captain's words echoed through the space, wrapping around us like an impenetrable shroud. I could feel the tremors of fear ripple through the rows of seats. The baby's cries shifted from innocence to the anthem of despair, and every heartbeat against the hushed chaos rang loudly against the walls of my mind. Malfunctioned? I whispered, as if saying it too loudly would bring it to life. I caught the CEO's gaze, and within it, I saw a flicker of determination clash against fear. He moved closer, a silent understanding passing between us, a determination to not let hopelessness sedate the spirit of our struggle. "Let's stay busy," he said, his voice low yet firm. "It's easier to fight the fear if we have something to do." Nods followed his words, emanating from scattered corners of the cabin, and an invisible thread began to weave us together. Passengers rallied around the young mother, taking turns to soothe her baby, blocking out the chaos with laughter and gentle coos. I joined the effort, lending my voice as I recited calming phrases I had used countless times before, trying to cocoon the little one in warmth while the mother's eyes reflected a myriad of emotions I knew too well: fear, worry, and overwhelming love. As we cradled the baby, a piece of hope cracked through the shell of despair forming around us. I watched as the young mother's shoulders gradually uncoiled, her breaths becoming steadier. Despite the heavy weight pressing down on us, an ember of solidarity flickered within the strangers' hearts, binding us tightly in this swirling tempest of uncertainty. My heart squeezed as if to say, "Together, we can endure." "Can you manage the baby?" I asked the mother, who nodded gratefully, and as I eased my hands away, I noticed something beautiful reflected in the so's eyes: a shift from a leader to a partner, an unspoken acknowledgement of our shared humanity. We were stripped down to our essentials, raw and true, revealing our fears yet offering kindness in the midst of turmoil. Then came a different sound, a distant clang and thud from the overhead compartments. A few passengers nervously turned their heads, eyes wide like startled deer. The fear returned, creeping through the cabin like a tide, every eye shifting toward the source of the noise, hoping for clarity. "Stay calm," the CEO said again, making eye contact to maintain steadiness among the rising panic. He moved toward the source of the sound, glancing swiftly back at me. "Stay with me. We'll check it out together." I followed him, a part of me yearning for a semblance of purpose, to be part of the solution rather than a bystander enveloped in dread. With each step toward the noise, trepidation battled with the insistence that hope had to emerge from this darkness, a shared struggle, a commitment to lift one another amidst overwhelming chaos. Finally, we reached the overhead compartments. A small suitcase had fallen, likely jostled loose by the turbulence, its split zipper gaping open like a wound. The CEO crouched down to assess the damage, chuckling softly. "Looks like someone packed a little too much." A nervous sound erupted from somewhere in the back of the plane, a flicker of laughter. It spread through the cabin, weaving its way into hearts that had felt heavy with despair moments before. Suddenly, I could see it clearly. Even in this fight for survival, we could find shards of light to guide us, flickers that reminded us of who we were beneath the shells we wore, warmth of vulnerability glimmering amid the bitter wind of fear. Just then, someone called out from the back of the cabin. Muffled voices met our ears with an undercurrent of urgency. "Water! We need water!" A woman's voice shrilled, tinged with panic. The energy shifted again, our moment of levity swallowed by rising anxiety. Was there more trouble surging through the cabin? Before I could react, the CEO moved toward the voice, motioning for me to follow as we approached the chaos at the far end. Yet as we reached there, all I could perceive were faces, some behind hastily raised arms, others twisted in worry, trapped in the whirlwind of an undetermined fate. As we neared the source, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a young man in a suit, frantically fussing with a nearby compartment. I couldn't tell how many of us shared this collective uneasy. It was palpable, ripe with the reality of our confinement. "Help!" the young man shouted suddenly. "There's someone in here who needs water." My heart raced, and I turned to the CEO, emotions colliding in a swarm of confusion. But before I could voice my thoughts, another tremor reverberated through the craft. The lights flickered and chatter devolved into stunned silence once more. "This can't be happening," I murmured, my chest tightening as the realization that our very lives were at the mercy of that malfunction echoed within my mind. A shiver cut through the air around us. The urgency was unmistakable, and for every ounce of courage I clung to, a new wave of dread crashed in its wake. But something about the determined gaze of the man nearby sparked a new flicker within me. "Look," he called out, voice steady but strained. "We need to take action." And just as the atmosphere thickened from fear to resolve, I felt the lightest touch on my arm breaking through the storm. The CEO's hand encircled mine reassuringly. "We'll get through this," he whispered, but as our fingers twined, the cabin shook violently once more. In that moment of uncertainty, as the plane shivered against yet another tumultuous tremor, I dreaded what we had yet to face, the impending challenges lurking just beyond our reach. It struck me like an electric shock as the emergency alarms started to sound, amplifying the chaos. We weren't just trapped, we were still very much in danger. As my breath quickened, I grasped the CEO's hand tighter, the warmth grounding me against the waves of fear crashing in every direction. And then came that jarring realization. What if, amidst our choices for survival, we had already lost pieces of ourselves we might never get back? The uncharted depths of despair loomed closer, but within me flickered a desire to fight, a drive to take back control. But one question spun wildly in my mind. Gnawing at what other secrets did this plane hold, lurking beneath its surface, silently waiting to emerge? I could feel the pulse of the cabin, a storm of emotions radiating in every direct iota fusion of hope, dread, and determination. We were all at the center of this multifaceted crisis, but the air around us shifted as the alarms wailed, blaring insistently like a cry for rescue. "Everyone stay calm." The CEO's voice rang out, a beacon amidst the chaos. But how could we remain calm when the world felt as though it was unraveling with each tumultuous jolt? I glanced at the young mother, her face pale as she clung tightly to her baby, who had resumed a soft whimper. Tension knotted in my chest each time her gaze darted toward the trembling overhead compartments. I knew she was wrestling with fear of the unknown, just as we all were, a community forged by a crisis, yet feeling painfully isolated in our trembling vulnerability. "Let's find water for that woman," I urged, earning a nod of agreement from the CEO. The young man in the suit was already organizing a few of the more steadfast passengers to help a collective spirit emerging amongst us amid rising panic. He gestured toward the back of the plane where it seemed we might find supplies. As we moved through the cabin, I could feel the heaviness of despair mingling with persistent flickers of courage. A woman reached out and squeezed my hand, her grip signaling shared fear, but also quiet solidarity. "We can do this together," she said, her voice tiny yet fervent. But as we made our way toward the rear, the lights flickered ominously. Darkness pervaded the space for moments longer than seemed reasonable. Fear strangled my breath as instinct urged me to retreat, but the CEO's hand tightened reassuringly around mine. He uttered a few words to the young man in the suit, coordinating our efforts. And suddenly that warmth surged within me. Once more, perhaps even the smallest steps toward connection could manifest something greater. "All right, everyone," the young man began, his voice cutting through the thickening tension. "We need to work fast. There should be emergency supplies in the back. Follow me." We shuffled forward, an army of strangers uniting under shared urgency. Yet the hurdles continued to rise, and shadows danced on the walls of uncertainty. The sound of the sirens danced on the edges of my awareness as we pressed forward, the weight of fear continuing to push against my chest with each step. As we navigated through the cramped aisles, I noticed several passengers reaching into overhead bins, some retrieving blankets while others pulled out personal items with trembling hands, as though they were collecting pieces of their identity amid the madness. There was something heart-wrenching about the sight, as if we were each unconsciously gathering remnants of hope to brave the depths of despair together. "Here," someone called out, and a sense of relief swept through us as we reached the rear of the cabin. The young man gestured toward a blue emergency kit with reinforced edges, wedged above the crew's control space. "Help me get that down." With the CEO at my side, we worked as a team, our hands reaching to pry the kit free. The alarms continued to blare, but our focus sharpened into a singular goal: the need to help, to bind the wounds of our shared anxieties through any means possible. That at last, we wrestled the kit down, and cheers erupted among the passengers who gathered around us like startled birds flocking toward a light. I felt a wave of energy spread, a communal heartbeat rising in unity, wiping away the fear inch by inch. As I fumbled with the zipper, my hands trembled in anticipation. What solace could lie within that package? Quick, water bottles. The voice of the young man broke through my momentary reverie. As we began digging into the kit, the first thing I pulled out was a small stash of bottled water, and it spilled over the edge of the Kita cascading cascade of hope that fell into the outstretched hands of others. Every bottle exchanged hands like a lifeline, smoothing some of the wrinkles of distress that marked weary brows. I could see the young mother gaze down at her child, her expression softening as she took a sip of the precious liquid before offering a few drops to the baby's lips. But as the tension was slowly but surely tempered, the cabin quaked in a sudden lurch that knocked me off balance. I stumbled, grasping for the edge of the emergency kit to steady myself. But the alarm didn't wane. It only intensified, a dark omen of the chaos to come. What was that? A voice cried out, panic rippling through the cabin. The CEO shot me a glance, both of us clearly sharing the same heavy realization this was more than just a flight gone wrong. A deeper, more visceral threat loomed around us, and part of me dreaded what could possibly reveal itself next. Then, in the midst of the brewing storm, from the farthest corner of the cabin, a figure emerged. It was a flight attendant, her face a mask of worry, stumbling toward us with urgency. "Everyone stay in your seats," she yelled, her voice firm, yet trembling slightly. "We need to prepare for emergency protocols." Confusion rippled through the group, and my heart skipped a beat. We could feel the shaking intensifying, yet her words bore weight, a shift that deepened the tides of urgency within each of us. My breath quickened once more, a nagging thought gnawing at the back of my mind. Did we still have time? What protocols awaited us, and how much longer could we endure the storm brewing around us? Just before the attendant could reach us, another violent tremor rattled the cabin, and I was thrown sideways, colliding into the Sahai's arms embraced me instantly. Gripping tight in an instinctive act of protection, in that fleeting moment, grounded yet spinning, it all crystallized. Beneath the chaos and lurking dread, a truth surfaced. No matter how tightly stitched fate tugged at the threads of our lives, our choices, our resolve, and the connections we forged laid the path forward. But just when hope felt tangible, the flight attendant turned towards us, eyes wide with revelation. "We have an emergency situation," she gasped, breathless, holding our collective gaze. "Someone on board is unresponsive, and we need to act now." The revelation hung in the air like a thick fog, each heartbeat reverberating around us. A wave of panic surged through the cabin, drowning out the sirens and gunfire of distant reminders that echoed in the minds of the passengers. The flight attendant's eyes darted around the space, desperate for help, and even in my disoriented state, I felt an urgent pull, the instinct to act, the tightening bond of humanity, pushing through the fear. "Please, everyone," she pleaded, her voice fierce yet trembling. "We need to stay calm, but we also need volunteers to assist. Is anyone trained in first aid?" A shuffling of feet followed as anxious bodies exchanged nervous glances. But amidst the chaos, I felt an unexpected tingle of courage bubble within me. I had once taken a first aid course. It felt both ancient and fresh, a forgotten yet vital key to unlock my willingness to step forward. "That I can help." I heard myself call out, the words escaping my lips before doubt could stifle them. My heart raced, and I could feel the eyes of those around me land on me, the weight of uncertainty as palpable as the cabin's tremors. The flight attendant focused on me, her expression shifting from panic to gratitude. "Thank you. Please, follow me." She turned sharply, her stride swift as she navigated back through the aisle, beckoning me to follow. Just as I started toward her, I felt the CEO's eyes on me, a silent encouragement whispering through the chaos. He didn't let go of my hand, anchoring me in this storm of uncertainty. "Are you sure?" he whispered against the din, worry pooling in his gaze. Beneath the steely exterior head shone. I nodded, my voice steadying with purpose. "They need us. We have to try." Together, we moved to the back of the cabin, where a small gathering of passengers had formed. There, in the narrow aisle, was a man lying flat on the floor, pale and gasping, his face betraying a struggle I couldn't reconcile as he fought against what felt like an invisible enemy. Panic etched the faces of those surrounding him, creating ripples of fear that threatened to spill over. The flight attendant knelt beside the man, her hands deftly checking his pulse and signs of distress. "We don't have much time," she murmured, urgency sharpening her voice. "Can someone assist? I need help getting him into a better position." Instinct took over, and suddenly I found myself kneeling beside her, my hands moving almost on autopilot to help. The CEO knelt on my other side, edging closer than before, each motion igniting an unexpected sense of partnership. In those strained moments of attempting to stabilize the man, I felt a flicker of hope spark in the air around us, even while the weight of fear loomed larger. "Get his feet up, and let's try to get him breathing," the flight attendant instructed, and we worked in sync, lifting the man carefully, keeping our movements gentle yet purposeful. The young mother, still cradling her baby, urged herself closer to the growing crowd, attempting to see what was unfolding. She clenched her child tightly, but I noticed her eyes fierce with the same determination we wore like armor. "You guys can do it," she called, chasing away shadows of dread as she leaned against the wall for support. "We need anyone with medical experience to come back here." The flight attendant called out again, her voice ringing out over the din. But it was tinged with a slight tremor, revealing her own uncertainty. From within the throng, a middle-aged man with silver hair stepped forward, a reassuring calm around him. "I'm a doctor," he declared, and just like that, a new light broke through the storm. Together, we hoisted the unresponsive man into a better position. My heart hammered in rhythm with the pulse of the crisis around us mingled dangerously with dread, and I cursed the vulnerability that threatened to engulf us. As the doctor moved into action, the flurry of voices faded into the background, replaced with concentration. Each beat felt heavier, an unyielding weight against our shared fear. "He needs oxygen," the doctor said, urgency redirecting our focus. A few passengers rushed to secure the emergency oxygen masks, and as they dangled, I caught glimpses of both terror-filled and determined faces. But amid the unfolding threads of chaos around, an unexpected kindness appeared. A young man, a stranger to us, began passing around his own belongings. "Take what you need," he urged, handing out the granola bars and small snacks he'd collected during boarding. "If we're going to get through this, we have to help each other survive." With each exchange, a glimmer of community emerged in the dread-laden atmosphere. The sudden thought flickered in my mind, casting shadows of concern. What would happen if this passenger, didn't pull through? What stories would remain untold? But for now, I pushed the thought away, focusing intensely on the next breath, the next moment, the chance to connect and heal. Then the plane lurched violently again, shaking as if the very fabric of our reality teetered on the brink. The lights flickered, the alarms became a cacophony of dread, and I gripped the CO's hand tighter, our shared warmth grounding my spiraling thoughts. The flight attendant let out a cry, glancing towards the cockpit. "What's happening?" In that instant, I felt the tremors of panic return. The cabin was tilting, and fate was cruelly reminding us of our fragility. Just as clarity slipped away again, the doctor looked into the eyes of the man beneath him, and with a desperate call for help, he shouted, "We need a defibrillator." Now, the urgency surged, and the wild rhythm of my heart echoed through the panic as the flight attendant dashed towards the front, eyes wide with determination. It was then, in the stirring silence that followed, that I understood I had stepped into something much larger than I could ever have imagined. But just as clarity rushed back, a piercing scream erupted from the front of the cabin, cutting through the chaos, a desperate voice shouting the words no one wanted to hear. "We're going down." And just like that, everything changed. The cabin quaked, and time felt suspended, as if the air were thickened with dread. Hearts surged. Gasps swallowed the murmurs of panic. My head spun. The words "were going down" echoed in my mind like a death knell. I squeezed the CEO's hand tighter, feeling the warmth radiate between us, desperately clinging to the frail thread of hope we had woven. Flight attendants rushed towards the front, adrenaline fueling their movements. The cacophony around us drowned out everything except that insistent thrum of our shared fear. Yet, among the rising tides of panic, I could still sense the flickering embers of kindness, strangers reaching out to one another, sharing water, offering comfort in whatever small ways they could muster. The flight attendant returned, her eyes wide, hands grasping the defibrillator, as if it were a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. "Step aside," she called out, urgency fueling her voice as she knelt by the man. The doctor was quick to help, exchanging panicked glances but resolute in purpose, flipping the device open as the tension in the cabin thickened like a storm brewing on the horizon. "Stand back, everyone," he shouted. My stomach twisted as I beheld the scene, uncertainty clawing at my insides. The CEO let go of my hand just enough to support himself with the seat, his jaw set tightly. I was momentarily adrift, caught in the swell of fear that pulled at me from all sides. Someone nearby was crying, the muffled sound of despair layering upon the frantic utterances of those around them. I could feel the weight of their fear draping over me like a heavy shroud, suffocating my senses. In the blend of confusion and dread, I caught the mother's gaze again, her baby nestled close. She looked at me like I was the last lifeline in this tempest, and in that moment, the gravity of the situation unfolded. Each decision could prove to be pivotal, perfect or imperfect, life or death. Suddenly, the defibrillator let out a sharp, mechanical beep, a sound that sliced through the emotional fog. "Clear," the doctor commanded, and a collective intake of breath swept through the cabin as he activated the device. The lifeless form beneath us jolted with electricity, and he managed a second attempt, sweat glistening on his brow, the urgency of his actions a desperate plea against the darkness. Then there was a moment, a heartbeat stretched into eternity. The air crackled as we held our breath, willed the man to respond, to defy the void that threatened to swallow him whole. And finally, a shuddered inhale escaped the man's lips, rising like a fragile phoenix. The doctor's face lit up like dawn breaking through a long night. "He's breathing." Hope surged through the cabin, and though the air was still thick with uncertainty, we were not lost. Yet, just as we found that fleeting light amidst the chaos, another violent jolt rocked the plane, knocking me off balance. I grabbed the nearest seat for stability, the hope fraying at the edges as alarms blared, more frantic and desperate than ever before. The flight attendant struggled to stay upright, her expression frozen in equal parts determination and fear. "Brace yourselves," shouted the captain over the intercom, his voice steady, a mere facade hiding the anxiety bubbling beneath. The cabin plunged into a deeper state of panic as the plane rumbled and shook. I could sense the impending descent, an unsteady spiral into uncertainty that echoed in the jolting motions around us. Reaching out, I felt the CEO take my hand once more, this time with fierce determination. Our eyes collided. His unwavering gaze told me we were in this together, freed from the burdens that had once defined us. I felt supported and diminished at the same moment, a paradox that left my heart racing even faster. Then, a sound erupted from somewhere behind, sharp, chaotic, and violent. The floor rattled like thunder, and another scream pierced the air. This time, not just one voice, but a chorus of horror rising with our fate as the cabin was filled with smoky and acrid taste of fear that burnt my throat, choking back the rising tide of dread. I turned and saw the faces of the passengers, wide-eyed and panicked, their senses heightened, their humanity manifesting in raw expressions of desperation. Strangers had become lifelines. Families who scarcely knew each other were banded into a small universe striving to survive. The smoke curled and danced, chasing us, taunting us, and the realization hit hard: our future was no longer guaranteed. My breath faltered, the weight of despair creeping in, threatening to drown me in despair. The flight attendant was shouting, coordinating efforts to guide everyone in preparing for impact. I caught a glimpse of the baby tucked against the mother's chest, their innocence juxtaposed against the unfolding tragedy. It pulled on my heart, a reminder of everything worth fighting for. An unexpected flash of bravery surged through me. Someone had to do more. "We need to help," I yelled, my voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to get everyone to the back. It'll be safer." Not waiting for affirmation, I moved instinctively towards the passengers, urging them, each step heavy yet hopeful. The CEO followed closely beside me, his presence a reassuring weight. We gathered those we could reach, an island of humanity forming in the tempestuous storm that raged around us. Faces shone with determination, each willing to forge ahead even as uncertainty loomed large. And then, Just as we began to make some headway, a sudden explosion rocked the cabin again. The lights flickered and then flickered out entirely, plunging us into darkness, save for the faint red glow of emergency lights casting ghostly shadows across anxious faces. My heart dropped into my stomach. I was so close to achieving something. Hope became a wildflower amid the wreckage, but now it felt like everything was unraveling. Every ounce of courage I'd gathered came crashing against a fresh tide of despair. I in the refrain of a heartbeat. Everything that had been gained seemed about to be lost. Where was the strength to carry on buried in the shadows? As the world around us shook, I clung to the CEO's hand-me lifeline in this darkness, wondering how we would emerge from the storm. Then, a captured breath whispered in the silence as something shifted just beyond our awareness, and I felt it shift in the air, warmth remaining just out of reach. But before I could grasp it fully, it flickered and dimmed, leaving a vast chasm of uncertainty, the unknown encroaching like a tidal wave. What lay ahead in those stretching moments? I couldn't know. But as the darkness closed in around us, I understood with terrifying clarity we weren't just clinging to life, we were fighting for it. And whatever awaited us, the resolve to face it, to journey through the fog of fear together, had ignited a spark of defiance within me that could never be extinguished. And then, another voice broke through, one I knew distinctly, cascading shock through the depths of my being. "We're not done yet," it told me, resonating somewhere deep in my heart. But the price of that revelation hung in the balance, waiting in the same shadows that threatened to consume us. The cabin shuddered once more, a reminder that time was not on our side, and panic clutched at my heart like a vice. The chaos that enveloped us transformed into an undulating sea of shadows and despair. I squeezed the CEO's hand harder, our connection a fragile anchor in this stormy sea. Fear soaked my clothes, instantaneously merging with the sweat of desperation. It didn't belong to just me anymore. It threaded through every clenched jaw and trembling lip around us, uniting us in turmoil, binding us in agony. As the emergency lights painted eerie patterns on the faces surrounding me, I caught a glimpse of the mother, her gaze now wide with terror, not just for her child, but for how fragile life had become for all of us. I felt the weight of her worry, her heart thrumming in sync with mine, and suddenly the plane morphing into a confinement, an unyielding cage we had not signed up to enter. "Keep moving toward the rear," shouted the flight attendant over the rancid mix of smoke and fear, her voice an urgent beacon amid this maelstrom. "We need to stay together." In that madness, determination surged within me once again. We could still make it out. "Come on. We have to help everyone," I hollered, moving through the shifting shadows, pulling people along, even the reluctant, even the middle-aged businessman who had been too paralyzed by fear to act. "Please, just follow my voice," I implored, hoping that courage would be like a thread to weave everyone closer. And as if awakened by that plea, a middle-aged man, visibly trembling, stepped forward, his features streaked with fear and resolve. The CEO, with resolve blossoming in his gaze, responded to my silent plea by glancing around, rallying others with him. "Let's go," he urged, his voice cutting through the hairs on the back of my neck. I looked at him, feeling the magnetic pull of his confidence, an anchor amidst the swirling chaos that surrounded us. One by one, more people started moving, their eyes lighting with a glimmer of hope. We turned back, knowing we had a greater purpose, not just to survive, but to fight for one another, to kindle the flickering flames of compassion. A shared humanity began weaving through the dark fabric of the moment, illuminating the paths of those around. But just as we gathered momentum, the plane lurched yet again. The jolt stole my breath, and in a flurry of movement, I stumbled against a wall, my body crashing into a passenger as the lights flickered ominously. A terrified scream echoed, sharp enough to chill my spine. Something hard and unyielding had struck the fuselage, resulting in cries of anguish that shattered our newfound camaraderie. "Keep moving. Do not stop." The flight attendant's voice was a clarion call in the surrounding chaos. "There's no time for fear." In pushing forward, glimmers of humanity emerged. A teenage girl held her younger brother's hand tighter. A father lifted his nearly unconscious son to shield him from the choking smoke, and an elderly woman was cradled by a fatherly figure, each act of kindness mere droplets in a vast sea of distress. But amidst the united front, every heartbeat hung in the balance, pressed against the claustrophobic confines of the plane. Each step felt like destiny narrowing down to a single moment, a shared fate tangled in our tenuous grips on life and each other. And then, in the dim light, I perceived the plane's exit sign glowing weakly in the distance. Hope once more ignited within me as I shouted, "There! Just a little further. We can do this." But just as we neared our goal, our small universe jolted violently. Once again a sound like shattering glass echoed across the cabin, punctuated by the feeling of being catapulted forward. The floor tilted, a sudden change in gravity that sent me sprawling to the ground, pain searing my palm against the cold, unfamiliar floor. The shout of terror erupted again, enveloping us like a chokehold. I looked around frantically, the vision of our escape flickering like a candle in a storm. A hand reached down to me. It was the CEO, his expression fierce as he pulled me to my feet. "We can't stop," he urged, impossibly calm amidst the storm. The touch of his hand was grounding. As I rose, my breath hitching, I saw the flicker of panic beneath his bravado. Just a flicker, quickly buried, but undeniable. "Let's go," I shouted again, spurred by the unyielding need to keep moving. As we resumed formation, a ragged line of humanity standing against the tide. We crept toward the rear, our sanctuary feeling so near and yet so impossibly far. And then it happened. The overhead compartment exploded, chunks of metal falling like angry hail, causing passengers to recoil, screams crescendoing all around, blending into a cacophony of despair. In that moment of surging panic, I lost my grip on the CEO completely as the chaos enveloped us in a wave of confusion. "Help!" A voice broke through the commotion. It was the teenager. Her brother collapsed beneath the debris. Time slowed. My heart stuttered. If we helped them, would we be too late to reach safety? Could I look away from their need, their innocence? In an instant, I found myself torn, a heartbroken decision swelling within me. I glimpsed the CEO's desperate plea, the unspoken understanding in his eyes. We were at a crossroads, bound by the weight of humanity's fragility. Before I could act, the ground shook again, and a deafening crack reverberated through the cabin, slicing through my thoughts like a blade. I turned, and through the smoke, I saw the exit sign flicker diminishing. "Now!" The flight attendant roared, pushing ahead to guide the back passengers. But ahead lay a terrifying reality emerging from the chaos, the growing realization that escape was merely an illusion. Hope, a fluttering wing flitting desperately against the encroaching dark. In that heart-pounding moment, as I stood at the precipice of choice, I felt it, the pulse of hope shifting. A whisper in the shadow, a promise laced through the fear. But before I could act, I heard the captain's voice one last to me, a crackling urgency echoing in the storm. And suddenly, everything fell into a crushing silence, the world grinding to a halt. And then, the lights went out, and I was plunged into the unknown, the echo of dread drowning out everything I thought I knew, leaving me gasping on the edge of a revelation that shone just beyond my reach, leaving me with one final thought. We were not just fighting for survival, we were fighting for each other, and whatever awaited us on the other side would change everything. The cabin's sudden darkness twisted my stomach in knots, amplifying the terror that had gripped us for so long. I fumbled through the thick tendrils of disbelief, trying to orient myself in the confined space that once felt so familiar, a flying vessel filled with strangers, now transformed into an arena of primal fear. "The emergency lights!" someone shouted, but it only reminded us of the fragile flickers that could extinguish at any moment. That cruel silence was punctuated by muffled cries and the disorientation of shifting shadows. My pulse quickened as the reality of our situation sank in. Every breath felt like an act of rebellion, as if inhaling too deeply might draw death closer. "Stay close," I heard the CEO's voice cut through the veil of stark panic that surrounded us. His hand reached out again, a beacon of warmth in this dark abyss. I snatched it instinctively, squeezing it tight, as if the pressure could banish fear itself. "Where do we go?" I shouted, attempting to catch ears amid the tumult. My words felt hollow against the backdrop of whimpering children and terrified adults. "Back to the galley." The flight attendant's voice broke through again, urgent and insistent. "We can help them regroup." It's safer there. Regrouping felt like a gamble between life and death, but we had little choice. I glanced back, my heart aching as I saw the teenage girl still pinned beneath the debris, her brother reaching out helplessly to her, tears streaming down his face. The instinct to help burned inside me like a wildfire, but I was rooted to the spot. The tug of loyalty to our group warred with the urgent cries for help, each one a thread pulling at my conscience. Go. They'll be right behind you. I yelled, though doubt wrapped around my heart like a vice. Don't be a hero. The CEO snapped back, his voice sharp with concern. We need everyone to keep moving. I hesitated, lingering in that moment of heartache, torn between the chasm of responsibility to the group and my desperate need to help the innocent. As if sensing my turmoil, the girl's brother shouted louder, his cries laced with a rising panic that seemed to press against the walls of my chest. Please, help her, he begged, and it felt as though the weight of the world settled starkly on my shoulders, each heartbeat a reminder of the fragility of life clinging by a thread. Then, a gentle touch against my arm startled me. A middle-aged woman had emerged from the shadows, her eyes flickering with compassion that shifted the atmosphere. We can do this together, she whispered, her voice quaking but steady. If we stay united, we have a chance. The flicker of hope ignited within me. I darted forward, my heart racing, but the cabin felt alive with chaos. It writhed as injured bodies and debris formed a labyrinth I had to navigate. With firm resolve, I returned for the girl, bending low, desperate to clear the smothering weight from her frame. Grab my hand. I shouted over the cacophony, reaching out to the girl. Her gaze locked onto mine, brimming with disbelief and fear. But in that moment, something shifted. She focused on my outstretched fingers. Determination swirled in my gut, urging me forward. The grip I had on hope transformed. I felt hands grasping behind me, the others improbably slowing, their combined force guiding me as I pulled the girl from the rubble. We secured ourselves in a tenuous community, our voices rising above the din together. I shouted, and it became our mantra as we began to inch toward the galley, fists clenched, feet pounding on the aircraft floor, a setting that had morphed from mundane travel to desperate bravery. As we moved, I caught glimpses of faces, some fierce, some resolute, some clouded by doubts, and a few blooming with compassion, each expression a reminder that life was struggle and beauty in equal measure. And just as we approached the galley, the shrieking bends of metal pierced the air, the plane rocked violently, sending me sprawling against the wall, another wave of heavy debris crashing down. Screams erupted as we all fought for our balance, a reminder again that nothing felt certain. That I can't let go. The girl screamed, gripping me with a sense of fierce determination. I held her tighter, feeling the tremors of doubt reverberate through our tiny world. But then, as if conjuring a miracle, the woman beside me steadied herself, pulling both of us closer against the shelter of the galley. We hold on, she urged, her eyes flickering with empathy. We fight through this together. We save each other. Now, her resolve spilled over me, igniting my own courage. Suddenly, the world outside felt insignificant compared to the mission pressing against my heart. Drawing in a deep breath, I bellowed over the chaos. Everyone, we're almost there. We're all going to make it. Just then, the captain's voice crackled over the microphone once more, interrupted by static, a portentous hint that something terrible was on the horizon. We need to brace for impact. Prepare yourselves. Time slowed me, grip stiffened around the CEO's hand, the weight of our intertwined destinies pressing together, and I could only bristle at the sharp realization that what awaited us could very well fracture the fragile connections we had formed amidst the darkness. As the cabin lurched violently once more, my heart raced with a new fear and a dawning understanding. We weren't just fighting for survival anymore. We were also battling the very fabric that held us together. Desperation clawed at my throat, and as reality wrapped its cold fingers around me, I realized that the end could very well be the beginning of everything. And then the lights flickered again, fading fast, dimming my hope as I choked out my next thoughts. We could either stand firm against the tide, or we would all be swept away together, a final testament to a fleeting connection built not just on survival, but on fighting for one another, however fragile it might be. In that heartbeat before everything descended into chaos, I felt the universe shift around me. The alarms blared, echoing in my ears like a sinister song. But I could hear the whispers of the passengers captured in moments of hope laced with fear, their breaths mingling with ours. Holding the CEO's hand anchored me, but it was the unity forming around us that breathed fire into my heart. When the captain announced, "Prepare for impact," the weight of that sentence settled over us, heavy and suffocating. Despite the whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm my senses, a singular truth emerged. We were not alone. With one another, we could find strength, dignity, and a semblance of peace even amidst impending doom. I could see the expressions of resolve, fear, but above all, compassion on the faces surrounding me. Families joined forces, strangers locked eyes, and for a split second, we existed not just as scared individuals, but as human beings bound together against the merciless tide. With every jolt of the plane, I could sense that life was slipping away me, purpose morphed into a single focus, to guide us all to safety, to fight against the darkness that threatened to consume us. The girl I had rescued gripped my hand still, her fingers trembling, and I thought of all who still needed rescue. "We must go together," I shouted over the cacophony, rallying the scattered souls who were contemplating their next move amid uncertainty. Every shared heartbeat ignited a flicker of defiance. Individuals began moving back toward one another as we forged a path through the smoky chaos toward the rear doors, slowly piecing our web of resolve, holding on to each other as tightly as we clung to hope. I could feel the CEO's eyes on me, searching for something in my own that he might not realize he sought. A mirror reflecting back our shared humanity, standing defiantly against despair. But just then, the ground beneath us quaked violently, a reminder of the precariousness of our existence. I braced myself against the galley door, and in the commotion, I felt the grip on my heart tighten around my very breath as the cabin quaked. A sharp sound rang out, another explosion, shaking our very core. But like a striking ember igniting a blaze, I saw it across the chaos, the light. In that piercing glow, I recognized the teenage girl's brother, eyes wide, anchored to his sister, calling out for her. I felt all the threads of connection snap into place, revealing what lay beyond our fears: love, courage, and the promise of safety for those who dared to act. "Help her," I shouted, my heart racing against the urgency of the moment. "We're going to move together." The tableau formed in those few heartbeats. One by one, people joined hands, bridging the stable ground we sought to create, desperately crafting the steps toward salvation. I caught sight of those tear-streaked faces following my call, some jumping into action beside us, some still hesitating in the grip of uncertainties. With every inch gained, every person saved, we embraced and became a shelter amid impending doom. But then came that final voice, the captain's shout again shattering the air. "Brace for impact." Adrenaline surged. I turned to my small group, the CEO beside me, together gripping hands, fortified by our expanding circle of determination. For every ounce of fear threatening to burden my heart, something beautiful emerged from the wreckage of our familiarity, and intimate connection forged in chaos, driven by the whisper tenderness settling like a heartbeat in my lungs. "We can do this. We can fight together." The plane bucked like a furious bull beneath us, and in that terrifying second, I leaned not only toward the escape we all craved, but lifted my gaze to the faces surrounding me, hearts daring to beat as one. That pivotal decision meant meeting the storm head-on with hope. As the plane began its ominous spiral downward, I remembered our shared moments, how life had intertwined each of us in this single journey. A connection established with strangers, each revelation brimming with the intimacy of understanding, so powerful it eclipsed the confines of fear. My spirit surged, "Ignite hope." With terror clawing at our backs, we squeezed tighter, hands entwined, breaths synchronized. "Together," I exclaimed, we pushed onward, those words of encouragement entangling in the ether. And then, against that shattering silence teetering on the edge of our collective breath, time seemed to fracture. The plane pitched with a deafening roar as it screamed against the sky. And suddenly, a blinding flash illuminated everything in white. In those rare split seconds, I was struck by the beauty of the chaos. Life's fragile treasures whispered truth into our essence. things we would otherwise never have learned. Then, with a cruel, resonating crash, the world tilted. Everything ceased, the darkness pooled, breaths halted, but it was the warmth of countless hands clinging to one another that broke the fall. When I opened my eyes again, I saw sunlight filtering through, washing over the wreckage of hardship. I lay among twisted metal and debris but felt the heat of affection merging through me. Echoing in the fabric of our existence merged each heartbeat, vibrating with a profound essence of humanity. "Are you all right?" the CEO asked softly, the familiar warmth of his hand reassuring me. I nodded, tears streaming down my face, relief and sorrow entwined. But more importantly, realization washed over me, a kind of unconditional love I never knew before, born from the depths of adversity. We took a collective breath, feeling the weight of survival, the threads connecting us unbroken. His eyes mirrored my own, filled not just with gratitude but acceptance as we both understood what lay ahead. Shaped by our shared journey and forged in our compassion day as sirens wailed and voices emerged around us, flooding in each person as they began to reclaim their humanity. I uttered a truth barely above a whisper, yet loud enough to imbue the sun-drenched remnants of the day with meaning that we made it through. Together. In that moment, I realized survival wasn't simply about escaping. It unfolded in the tapestry of connection we'd woven against all odds. It was a mosaic of kindness taking flight, the unraveled threads leading us home, and amidst the chaos of flight and fear, we discovered the legacy of what held us firm, the beautiful strength of compassion.